And let me change one more look. Okay, there we go. So I'm Randy Kearns, your professor over here at the University of New Orleans, and today we continue with session 3 of our Intro to Healthcare Management program. As we look through our 8 core competencies for people involved in management of healthcare systems, we want to talk about professionalism today. Why is it important? How do we project ourselves? What type of image do we portray? And how that instills confidence in the people that work with us, and how that helps people to better relate to who we are and the things that we're doing and the things that we're trying to do in the operation of a healthcare system. 5 things from today. We want to be sure that we at least understand what professionalism is, why it's important, certainly in a role such as someone leading a healthcare organization. We also want to talk about patient autonomy. It's in the American model of healthcare, a patient's right to choose the care that they can receive and also choose to not receive care is highly respected and certainly important. And so a part of that includes some of these other pieces that have emerged through the years as we try to balance both the science of medicine, but also the art, the subjective part of it, my opinion, how I feel about certain things that could be or should be done, and things that should not and don't need to be done. And again, from a patient autonomy standpoint, we'll also discuss beneficence, what that means, non-malfeasance. We'll talk through the definitions of beneficence, non-malfeasance, and justice, at least as it relates to healthcare management and self-determination as a patient, which again connects back to patient autonomy. You know, the biggest part about professionalism is how we manage our own behavior, how other people see us, ways that we can instill confidence in the people that we work with by showing the competence in the skills that we have. It's important for people to be able to trust us, but it's also important for us to be accountable for the things that we do and the things that we say. You know, when we have clearly defined principles of who we are, ethically, it's a lot easier for people to understand and see who we are and to be able to trust who we are. Recently, there were some organizational changes at one of the large hospitals close to where I live here in New Orleans, and those changes have left people uncertain, unhappy, and certainly it reflects the challenging times that we're facing. A lot of hospital systems right now in the American model of healthcare are not financially profitable for a number of reasons. The cost of manpower right now is substantial. The amount of revenue being generated for the care being provided is not as supportive as it has been in certain circumstances for a number of reasons. But all of these things lead to this constantly changing environment that we're seeing right now, and it can lead to difficult circumstances. Leaders who emerge during and following difficult circumstances, the survivors, so to speak, are the ones that truly show and demonstrate their capacity for being that true leader for the long haul. So let's start with clinical ethics, and let's talk about the role that the patient plays in their own care. We'll start with patient autonomy. The patient has a right to determine they can act of their own free will and accord, and they need to be fully informed. And then they have a right to decide how much care they want provided. There are certainties in life, and one of those certainties is that we will all die at some point. The challenge we have with that is the science side of medicine. We can keep a human body at least meeting the legal definition of life. We can keep a human body alive for a much longer period of time than in many cases where, as the person, we're aware of our surroundings or able to function in a manner that that's important to us. And so it's always important, particularly as people get older, it's always important to have those conversations of what do you want, what do you not want, what type of advanced directives do you have? Because, again, from a patient autonomy standpoint, it's important to know how far someone is willing to go to live one more day, to live one more week. There are again, there are limits that I think most of us have, and all of that is based on patient autonomy. It's free will. And from a medical standpoint, beneficence, being sure that we recognize what's best for the patient. This really doesn't have as much application as for a manager as it does for a clinician, somebody who's taking care of the patient. But beneficence is also one of those cornerstones. And on one hand, we want to be sure we're doing what's best for the patient. On the other hand, we want to be sure non-malfeasance, we do no harm. The aim is to always help and support our patients. Certainly to not harm our patients either purposefully or unintentionally. We also need to understand the consequences of our actions. And then justice. All patients are with similar conditions and similar situations have access to the same care. We have legal obligations to do that. We have moral and ethical obligations to do that. In terms of the difference between morality and ethics, morality is more about a person's personal views of right and wrong. Ethics are more about the reasons we think our behavior is right or wrong. Ethics is more grounded in logic, not particular personal preferences at the moment, but certainly what's logical for a given situation. The challenge with that, though, is there are not absolute rules at times, and how to principles and rules and behavior intertwine to be sure that to help us remind us what is the right and wrong behavior from a moral and an ethical standpoint. As healthcare professionals, we use a lot of these principles to help guide us in terms of the directions that we want to go. It is important to understand other points of views, even if they don't agree with ours, because they may have valid ideas. They may also remind us that we're not always right when sometimes we like to think we are right all the time. Sometimes we're not. And a part of that is, again, being sure that you're open-minded to hear the views of others. there are a lot of hot topic items right now here in the United States as it relates to clinical ethics. One is abortion. It has and continues to be a challenging topic of discussion because there are personal beliefs, there are religious beliefs, and then clinical implications. What are the implications for the life of the mother or a fetus in development before the fetus becomes a child? End of life care. At what point? How much is too much? Again, I've mentioned from a scientific standpoint, we can keep someone alive for a very long period of time, but should we? Sexual abuse, being sure that we report, shelter, and provide support for someone who is being sexually abused. Medical marijuana. The drug marijuana has seen many different approaches over the last 50 years, and for that matter, 150 years, and certainly the last 25 years have seen some interesting developments in the context of pain relief, anxiety management, weight support during conditions like chemotherapy treatments following cancer. People become nauseated, they become ill, and they lose a lot of weight, and they're not able to, because of the nausea associated with the treatment, they wind up being malnourished at times. And so there have been times that we've seen medical marijuana have a positive effect. The challenge with medical marijuana continues to be the confluence of laws that in some cases make this legal, in some cases it's still not legal, and it makes it very, very difficult for us to research the use of medical marijuana and fully understand the scientific value as well as the scientific limitations. As I've said a lot of times talking about marijuana, we don't know what we don't know, which means we haven't done a lot of research on it. So it may be a very good drug under certain circumstances, but we don't know the totality of what those circumstances are. And so again, it's one of those things to proceed with caution, but I think there's ample evidence to proceed. But because it's been such a stigmatized drug through the years, it's very difficult to have that type of conversation at times. Universal health care, countries that have financially been able to control cost of healthcare have some form of universal health care. And that's not the case here in the United States. The American model of healthcare, as I've said many times and will say many times, is a very expensive way to provide healthcare. And we don't always produce good outcomes. If you have a critical injury or illness, we do that type of medicine as well, if not better than anybody else in the world. But it's expensive. And until we take a deliberate course of action to either own all of the healthcare being provided, also known as a monopoly, controlling all of the supply, or and there are countries like England, as an example, owns all of the hospitals. They operate their national health system. Other countries like Canada have a national insurance plan. Everybody has the same insurance. It's a part of your right as a Canadian citizen, and that's known as a monopsony, where you control all of the supply by owning all of the insurance company that's acquiring all of the supply from all of the hospitals. And so you can control cost if you own all of one or own all of the other, but you can't. It's a lot harder to control cost at least as a government, it's a lot harder to control cost if you don't. Again, the market capitalism works well in a lot of areas. Capitalism works well to build wealth. It works well to maintain that balance of supply and demand, and the price point fluctuates based on what's available and how much people want what's available. It doesn't work so well in healthcare, and if there's ever been a place that we need to reevaluate how we provide healthcare in America, certainly universal healthcare is one of those places that we need to look at that. The health of non-documented immigrants. We have a number of people who come to our country who want to live here, but may not have gone through the legal process of crossing the border, applying for citizenship, and they're considered non-documented immigrants. In some cases, they were smuggled across the border. How do we provide healthcare for those people? The challenges that we encounter in dealing with again, we're a nation of immigrants, and so it's not unusual for people to come here from other countries, but because of the financial strife of what's going on in South and Central America, literally tens of thousands of people come here seeking a place to live, a safer place to live, and a better way of life. It does create this constant ebb and flow of discussion of how many immigrants can we add to the country. Anyway, it is certainly an ongoing, and has been and continues to be an ongoing debate. Domestic violence is really not such a debatable issue. Domestic violence is certainly a key topic that we want to be sure we're managing and dealing with, but it's far less controversial than most anything here. But gun violence, on the other hand, is far more controversial. We are a Second Amendment country, meaning we actually have over 20 amendments to our U.S. Constitution, but the Second Amendment is the one that deals with the right to own a firearm, a gun. And as as we have a number of guns in America, there's a lot of gun violence that exists in some places. And so how do we manage that? It's a horrible situation when someone shows up with a gun and hurts other people. And so, are there ways we can talk about that and work through that and deal with that without infringing upon someone's Second Amendment rights? It is an ongoing debate in our culture here in America. And then the last one is game addiction. It seems kind of curious that we would talk about game addiction, but just to understand, on one hand, it is a fascinating virtual world to participate in gaming. On the other hand, it can be such a time suck. It can really distract you from so much of what's going on in life. So much so that it is a true addiction that some people deal with and have to deal with. Anyway, when we talk about clinical ethics, the whole point is to help people understand the differences in what's right and wrong, what's appropriate behavior, and also look for what the moral positions are that we need to agree on, and what are those that we may disagree on from an ethical approach. the most important part of this is to recognize everyone needs to manage their own behavior. We can't really get into this this ongoing exchange of who's right and who's wrong. We have to have reasonable dialogue, and a part of that again gets back to how we work together, how we talk about these situations, and then that that also expands out into the organizational discussion, and what the logical framework is with that. Who's right and who's wrong may have varying degrees, or but regardless of the right and wrong part of this, the reality is if your exchange of ideas is by shouting at one another or displaying some level of violence, it's very difficult to establish any baseline of where we're going to be able to work together or understand each other. So let's also look at something else as it relates to the 4 clinical ethics that we've already talked about, and that's confidentiality. One of the key principles in American healthcare is confidentiality. A patient has a right to have their personal information kept private and not shared. And it's essential. It's an essential cornerstone of the American model of healthcare. We have one particular law called HIPAA, but and I'll talk about that a little bit more. But the point is, patient confidentiality is one of the core principles of how we deal with the things that we do. In fact, one thing that makes it very easy for people to lose their job is when they've violated the confidentiality of a patient. So why is it important? There is a relationship between the doctor and the patient. There's a relationship between the healthcare providers and a patient. And there's also an expectation of privacy and a right to privacy that a patient has. And that expectation should be met, and the right to privacy should be maintained throughout this. So here is HIPAA. HIPAA is the Health Information Portability and Accountability Act. It began in 1996. There were components of it that was added to or changed in 2009 as a part of another law that came into effect called HITECH. But HIPAA primarily is that law that gives you the right to control your health information and to set limits on who can see it. Health information, though, has also become a commodity that can be used as blackmail if someone gains access to your personal medical records and there's something particularly disturbing in those medical records. And so most of the software used in the medical world today was not developed with the thought that someone would purposefully try to break into that software, hack the software, and potentially use it to cause harm to the people or persons that either the software drives a device like an IV infusion pump, or it drives a device like a pacemaker, or it's the electronic health record that we use to take care of patients. Those systems were not designed with the thought of the vulnerabilities that could exist with somebody trying to break into it to disrupt what it's designed to do, to potentially harm a patient or to potentially expose and leak information about a given patient. The number of breaches of healthcare records has risen in a pretty dramatic way here in America. And it does reflect the ongoing challenges that we face and the ongoing opportunities that we have to improve the technology and to improve the security of our health information. HIPAA is not absolute. That there are times that there is a component of HIPAA that that does require transparency, how things can be communicated. In other words, if a child has been sexually assaulted, while the child has a right to privacy, the medical professional has a legal obligation to report that. If you don't report that, particularly in the state of Louisiana, you actually have violated a law, and that can be of a substantial consequence to you. And there's components of this, but the main point is healthcare professionals are required to report cases of either domestic abuse, sexual assault, or any type of disease of major public health concern. So as far as our 4 cornerstones, again, we've talked about patient autonomy and beneficence, non-malfeasance, and justice. The one that we also need to add in terms of clinical ethics includes patient confidentiality, and the importance of patient confidentiality. A part of professionalism is managing our own behavior. How other people see us is also a reflection of how we project ourselves, how we talk about things, how we work through the lives of others, and how we work with the lives of others. And those core ethical principles are really central to being both a professional and what professionalism is. So again, it's really about managing our own behavior. It's about the ethical values that we hold and the moral compass that we personally maintain. It's also about managing core competencies. When we talk about these 8 key core competencies that any professional involved in healthcare management should have, that's a part of what we're talking about. People look to us as the person who helps to take care of them when they're sick, who helps to deal with challenges that they may have while they're in the hospital, and that includes helping them through a grief process when they've had loss. And understand that people who have entrusted us for their care, they look to us as those professionals. Now, again, many of us will not be involved in the clinical care of patients, but as leaders of these organizations, we must be compassionate for the patients that are entrusted to us that we care for. Look, all of this really gets down to what are the core competencies of our job? How do we manage that? How do we deal with that? Understanding, what the rules and obligations are, but also understanding, again, both our personal obligation and our professional obligation. A part of this includes looking the part. What image do we project? Who are we working for? Who are we working with? What job do you have? What job do you want? How do you dress for that? Do you dress to impress? It is important for us to look the part. It's important for us to carry ourselves in a way that others look at us with a certain degree of respect, trust, and reliability. Some of this starts with personal hygiene. A clean body uh, you know, taking care of your hair, taking care of your teeth, your face, all of the things that project to others a professional image includes personal hygiene, the way you take care of your body, the clothes that you wear. This can be a bit challenging, particularly when you're first starting out and you don't have a lot of options. One of the things that we try to do is we try to maintain a clothing closet for students who need to dress up for an interview and may not have an opportunity to wear some better clothes. And so it is important to dress the part that you want to play for the job that you want, for the role that you want. One of the biggest challenges we have today is we're walking around with basically a small handheld computer all of the time. We call it a phone. It's almost attached to our hand at all times. The challenge is how much of having that becomes more of a distraction than a tool to help us. We've got to be sure that our focus remains on the job at hand. Sometimes it's very easy to get caught up in the technology. We have to maintain both a working contact with the people that we're working with. That includes how we focus our eyes, where we're looking at, who are we talking to, but it also includes our body language. What are messages that we're sending based on how we talk about things or how we project who we are. Again, if we're in the middle of a conversation, put the phone in your pocket. Try not to use the phone as a crutch for this constant interaction that we have. Again, phones are a very important communication tool for us to have, as well as a number of other things that we do with our phones. But it's also important to recognize that there are times we need to put the phone away and pay attention to what's going on and stay focused on what's going on. So not just look the part, but be the part. How do you deal with yourself in certain circumstances? How do you deal with others? How do you talk to people during certain circumstances when you're not feeling well? How do you deal with difficult people? Sometimes you're the difficult person, and it's not always easy to recognize that. And then how do you deal with that? How do you take responsibility for your actions? A part of professionalism, though, is recognizing your boundaries and understanding what are things that you're best at and focus on the things that you do quite well. Respecting others, respecting everyone includes those providing care. We always think about doctors and nurses. Just understand that there are plenty of places within a hospital that we don't have doctors and nurses, but the respect should still be there. There are jobs that pay much less, but are still important. Food and nutrition is important. Housekeeping is important. Those jobs typically don't pay very well. Those jobs typically go to people who aren't necessarily as smart as you are. And, but they deserve our respect. Everybody that we work with, the patients that we interact with, the families that we interact with, they all deserve our respect. And we have an obligation to treat them accordingly. Again, all of the people living inside the role of a patient, and certainly the patient's family, we need to be sure that we're providing them with the due respect that they deserve. A part of this also includes timeliness. someone once told me that he typically, the main reason he hired college graduates was because it showed him that someone under 25 years of age could actually be committed to something for 4 years or 5 years and get it done. He said there was very little else that he expected out of them other than commitment. And he said, someone who graduates from college, if they can't show you anything else, they can show you commitment to getting something done. And I found that interesting because, as an educator, most of our focus is on the content that we teach, being sure that, we leave behind meaningful pieces of information for our students, for the people who spend time in the classes. But sometimes it is the little things. Being on time. I always start a class at the moment the clock gets to whatever the hour is that we should start class. And I think a part of that is to set the message and to send the message that the priority is to be on time. I always finish before the time that we've allotted for the program to give people time for questions. But I can tell you, no matter how much you have to say, no matter how interesting it is, no matter how important it is, being on time also means finishing on time. If you try to hold people over because you've got one more thing to say or one more thing to talk about. I used to have a professor who did that, and it just drove me nuts because, I'm sorry, I've got to go to the next class, and you want to keep me here for another 5 minutes because you feel like what you have to say is so very important, but it's going to make me late for my next class. So being on time is about respecting the time of others. It's about respecting yourself and being sure that you can show to others that you respect their time as well. Select the words that you choose carefully. There are words in every language that certainly in the professional workplace really have no place in the workplace. And it is interesting because an American culture, in many cases, we kind of build around and emulate things we see on television. We have a great deal of content that's available to us, and some of the best television shows that or programs that we watch sometimes are filled with words that we certainly wouldn't use in our home, and we certainly I wouldn't use at work, and I would hope you wouldn't use at work. And I realize the colorful intent of using those words is for the shock value. Just understand that there's a huge difference between something that you see or hear in an entertainment type setting and something that you see or hear in a workplace type setting. And so being sure that you choose your words well, you carry yourself well, and you present yourself well. A part of that includes the way we present information, the way we talk about certain things. Telling the truth is one of those cornerstones, being sure that, look, it's your story and you need to tell it to the best of your ability. And I recognize that as you tell your story, you're going to focus on the facts that most likely support the position that you want to take. Just understand you need to present all of the facts. When you present all of the facts, that is what the truth is. When you withhold some of the facts, you tend to distort the story and you tend to potentially mislead someone. So it is important to be sure that you have all of the facts, and it's also important to be sure that you're telling all of the facts as you relate your story. And then be reliable. If you say you're going to do something, do what you said you would do. If you say there's somewhere you're going to be at a certain time, be sure and do it. Look, there are no excuses. There are just reasons why things weren't done. If you fall short, it's okay to fall short, but apologize. And then look back on what you made a mistake doing and take all reasonable steps necessary to be sure you don't make that same mistake twice. Look, we'll all make mistakes in life. There are I was in a job interview one time and someone said, looking back over your life, what changes would you have made if you had a chance to do it all over again? And, I thought for a moment and I said, my life is a collection of all of the good choices that I've made and all of the bad choices that I've made. And sometimes I've learned just as much from the mistakes that I made as from the good choices that I've made. But all of this takes me to where I'm at right now, and I like where I'm at right now. And so, again, you'll make mistakes along the way. Don't make excuses for it. Understand there are reasons why it may not have been done the way it should have been done. But it's simple. Just take responsibility for the mistake that you made, apologize, and move on. Hopefully that works for you. If it doesn't work for somebody else, maybe sometimes that's more their problem than it is yours. But just if you make mistakes, own the mistake, take responsibility for it. And the best way to avoid that is to do what you said you were going to do. Always look to exceed expectations. It's not just about doing your job. There's a situation known as the quiet quit, which basically means doing the very least you can do to still keep your job. And I'm just fascinated by the fact that at least at some level, some people feel it's okay. Look, if you ever want to get ahead, you have to show a work ethic that you're committed to doing as much as you can do to the best of your ability during the time that you're at work. Now, when I'm not at work, I'm not at work, and I'm not always going to be thinking about my job. But when I am there, I'm a committed professional, and I'm doing all of the things that I feel like are essential for the job that I have. But again, a part of this is exceeding the expectations of the people in your organization. It's not just doing your job. And then we work in healthcare, and in healthcare, understand that patients are the center of our focus. They're the center of our attention. It's never about you. It's always about reducing the pain and suffering. It's about being sure that patients are taken care of, their needs are being met. And if we can't meet their needs at our hospital, we're looking for a way to move them to another hospital to where their needs can be met. As we look through these different images of patients, the one key element in each of these patients is how we connect with patients, how we work with patients, and how we care for them. So again, part of this, we started with how we manage our own behavior. We talked about those core ethical principles. And that's really the first part of professionalism. So the second part of the definition is so that others can see how we have mastered, again, these core competencies of our job. And that really gets to things that we want to include, such as how we respect each other, we're on time, professional communication, being sure that we tell the truth, being reliable. We said we would do it, we did it, and then working to exceed expectations. When we show that, we're showing professionalism without necessarily using that word professionalism. Another thing to think in the context of both personal choice and professionalism includes personal health. And when we talk about personal health, one of the key pieces here that we look at in the United States is social determinants of health. That means not all opportunities to be healthy are equally distributed in our society, our country. Life expectancy in the greater New Orleans area can change by as much as 20 years just by living in a different zip code. And what I mean by that, living in a different community, what I mean by that is it may be more dangerous to live in a certain area. There may be less support, being able to buy fresh fruits and vegetables, having access to some of the food that's necessary for nutrition, having open spaces that you can move around in your environment that allow you to, is it a walkable community? I live in an area where it's very easy for me to leave my home and walk basically less than 2 city blocks to a streetcar line. And we have streetcars in New Orleans. It's a quaint part of our city, but that type of old-timey public transportation is still available, and it still gives me a chance to go to any number of places that I want to go, and it's very close to where I live. And I can walk less than a block in another direction, and I'm on a main street with lots of shops and stores and places that I can buy different types of meals, or I can buy different types of goods and services. But it's a healthy environment to live in. It's a healthy environment for children to live in, and yet not very far away. There are plenty of communities that don't have those same types of opportunities. And when we talk about social determinants of health, one of the key pieces we have in healthcare management is to understand these differences and look for ways to break down some of those barriers. Because while it's from a personal standpoint, it's great that I have all of those things at my fingertips, it would be important for other people to have those same opportunities in their own neighborhood. And so how do we look to strengthen communities in a way to allow other types of goods and services to be available in other communities? Socioeconomic factors play a huge role in healthy lifestyles. Education drives employment and income. The more education you have, the more training you have with skills and knowledge, the more likely you are to be successful in your life. And a part of that success includes how you're financially rewarded for it. There are other things that I've done in my life that paid me more money, a lot more money than I make today as a college professor. But I enjoy my life. I earn a salary that certainly supports the lifestyle that I want to maintain. And so I'm completely content and comfortable living the way I live in the life that I have. And that's what I would hope everyone strives for. Now, some people want to earn a great deal of money and they want to live an opulent life. And you know, again, in certainly in the American model of capitalism, that's available to you. But it is risk reward. How much risk do you want to take for the reward that you want to earn? Sometimes it comes with more education. It certainly comes with hard work. But it's there available to you. But just as much as it's available, it's also further out of reach if you don't have access to good education. If you don't have that strong, safe physical environment, some of these things create limitations on our ability to just live a healthy, long life. There are other choices that we make in terms of the food that we choose to eat, the diet that we have, how much exercise that we get. Do we use tobacco? If I haven't told you in the last day or so, tobacco use continues to be an ongoing, although fewer people use tobacco today than at any point in the last 50 years in the United States, it's still too many people. Tobacco use is addictive and it is dangerous to your health. And so it's just one of those things that if we know it's going to harm you, particularly over the long haul, well, actually, I'll add, one of my best friends died yesterday because of a lung disease associated with smoking for 30 years. So, we know there are determinants of health that improve our health outcomes or also can diminish our health outcomes. Some of those things include the places that we live. It also includes the choices that we make. Genes and biology, we can't change that. We have what we have. But while we can't change that, it is important for us to know if we have a potential for a pre-existing condition. So science at least can help point our personal physician into looking at ways that we can prevent or avoid conditions that may arise. Other parts of this, again, get back to understanding that opportunities for a healthy lifestyle aren't equally distributed. If we look at the neighborhood on the left or the neighborhood on the right, the one on the right, obviously, there's a lot more danger involved in a community like that. Again, this is New Orleans. Lifespan in certain areas can be, well, in this particular case, is 25 years difference between the area up close to the University of New Orleans compared to an area called Iberville or close to the French Quarter, where lifespan is a much shorter period of time. Again, all of that's based on any number of things, but when we think about social determinants of health, it's certainly important for us to think in the context of how do we support healthy communities to promote a long, healthy, successful life for everyone who lives in our city. Anyway, it's an ongoing challenge that we have here in New Orleans and certainly here in the United States. People who, there's also a direct correlation between how much money people earn and what type of medical conditions they have. So it's inversely proportional. What that means is the more money you make, the less likely you are to have some of these medical conditions. Now, what's that a reflection of? Well, it means typically the less money that you earn, the less likely you're able to make healthy choices, to buy healthy foods, to live a healthy lifestyle. And sometimes that's not just the choices that we make, it's because of the circumstances that we're in. And that's why we get back to promoting healthy communities to help assure that people have more equal opportunities to, again, obtain the same type of success others have enjoyed. Again, just looking at the different levels of education as it relates to three primary conditions: stroke, heart disease, and hypertension. What we see in this is people are more likely to have these three conditions: a stroke or heart disease or hypertension, with less education. Again, there's while education doesn't, while there's not a direct correlation between education and these diseases, the underlying component to this is the more that you know, the more you're able to protect yourself, the more you're able to recognize signs and symptoms of things that you need to take care of. And for that matter, the more you're able to earn a better living, to be able to have a healthier lifestyle that avoids some of these particular conditions. When we look at our local grocery store, what type of food choices are available? We have a great deal of food available in the United States. The challenge with that is not all of it is healthy. Some of the snacks that are available to us, if I've got a bag of potato chips and I've got a banana, and I choose the banana, hopefully I do choose the banana all the time, but sometimes I choose the chips because they're tasty. There's almost no nutritional value in the chips, but making unhealthy choices, particularly in a substantial way, can certainly undermine what we do both individually and how we support our community. But how are things organized in the store change our buying patterns? Other things includes food choices, what type of lifestyles may be expected. If you're from a different country, where do you find food in a local store that allows you to cook dishes that you're accustomed to cooking? Again, because we are a country of immigrants, most of the grocery stores that I go to have really different sections of food choices available. Sometimes it may not be wide-ranging, but it does remind you that there are certain food ingredients that are important if you're providing, if you're cooking dishes that are associated with an Italian heritage, or you're cooking dishes associated with a South American, Central American heritage, or an Asian heritage. But it does remind you that if you're from a different country and you're accustomed to different types of foods being available, what is available to you at the local grocery store. And I will say, in most of the grocery stores, at least I shop in the New Orleans area, we do have different sections available for those food choices. So overall health status of an American, not very healthy at all. Can you imagine trying to eat this is called, actually, I think this is called the heart attack burger, but the amount of food that's available in this burger, I can't imagine trying to eat this. I may pick the bacon off of it. I really like that. But again, just the fact that we even sell something like this at one particular restaurant is a bit fascinating. Even a Philly cheesesteak at Subway, which is the sandwich on the left, or a Dave's double at a Wendy's is the image on the right, reminds you that that's probably more food than we need to eat in a typical meal. Again, it's easy, but it's also hard to choose a healthier lifestyle. it's a lot harder when the opportunities aren't there. And it's important to know that those opportunities are not equally distributed in our society. And so it is important for us to continue to look for ways that we can help people get to that point. A part of this gets back to understanding where people are, what they need, and how do we support those needs. And then a part of this also drives up into patient demands. There's a challenge here with public health. There are also barriers to access. And again, all of this gets back to understanding limitations of the community, and understanding literacy, how people understand the things that they need to do to keep themselves healthy. Chances are many people don't understand what's going on with health literacy, because as a physician, we tend to run through things quickly, and you nod accordingly, and the reality is you didn't understand most of what you were just told by the physician. Many people lack health literacy skills. It's certainly a part of our professional obligation to be sure people understand what they've been told and what their instructions are. Much of the health information that's provided, many of the patients forget before they get home, or remember it incorrectly. Health literacy is certainly important for everyone. And with that, we get to kind of the end of our presentation for today. It is important for us to understand our commitment to professionalism. We also need to understand our personal morality views as well as our ethical beliefs. And then what is our ethical obligations to both our patients and the care instructions that we need to provide. And with that, we get back to our 5 things for today. What is professionalism? And then those 4 key components: patient autonomy, beneficence, non-malfeasance, and justice. And with that, we'll get to questions. Do you have questions today?
Good evening.
Hello, Professor.
So this class is very content. So the first I want to talk about this lesson we talk about professionalism. For common thoughts of unique ethics, patient autonomy, beneficence, non-beneficence, and justice. So, how to understand the third one, non-beneficence, from the American point of view? Thank you.
Sure. So, in terms of in terms of beneficence, non-malfeasance, justice, and patient autonomy, as we talk about that in the American healthcare system, one of the important aspects of that is to recognize the patient's right to self-determination, and our obligation as people who work in healthcare management, and how we respect a patient's rights to those things, and how we work with them to be sure that not just the pieces that I talked about, but also their privacy is respected. We all live, and at some point we're all going to die. Our obligation in healthcare is to do no harm, though, and to when I used to take care of patients, and a patient would ask me, "Am I going to die?" and my answer would be, my job is to be sure that doesn't happen today. We're going to do all that we can to take care of you, and we're going to do all that can be done to take care of you. And as we use our professionalism to help reinforce to patients what we're supposed to do and how we're supposed to do it, our patients will at least trust us to do what's best for them. And that's the best we can hope for, because that's what we're certainly aiming to do, is to do what's best for them.
The non-communication, we can chat the patient and not the
I'm sorry, there's an echo and I'm having trouble with the sound.
And we need to look like the person is very important. So we learn the concept, look the part. So we know we need to look like the person. So we learn to manage the person, we learn to manage ourselves. And the second, we can serve the patient. Finally, take the patient at the center of our personal focus.
Yeah, and you're right. We do need to manage ourselves. A part of managing ourselves includes, how we take care of ourselves, how we interact with others, treating people with respect. But you're right. We can't manage others until we manage ourselves, and a part of managing ourselves really starts with how we present who we are. Do we dress the part? Do we act the part? Do we treat people with courtesy and respect? There are a lot of things that we don't always understand about each other. But one thing we can always do is respect one another. But you're exactly right. We can't manage others until we manage ourselves. One of the most important things we can do is managing ourselves.
Thank you. The third question we talk about, we learn the social determinants of sales model, like healthy lifestyle, social economic factors, and the visual environment, and so on. So we learn life experiences different from community. We are talking about the healthy literature. So I want to learn what's the percent of health literature in the United States. Thank you.
Sure. So I think what I understood was in the context of leadership, and how we lead in these organizations really means understanding the operations, understanding the people that we work with, but also understanding the patients that we serve. Yeah, is that helpful? I mean, I do go back to something you just said that I think is very important, and that is, it's difficult for us to manage others if we don't first manage ourselves, because who we are is a reflection of the organization we represent. And if we're not doing a good job of managing ourselves, and that includes how we treat others, certainly with courtesy and respect, and how we carry ourselves, all of those things are essential in terms of how we work with others. You've got to be at peace with yourself. Who are you? Do you like who you are? Do you respect who you are, and do you respect the people that you work with? If you can do a good job of managing yourself, then it's a lot easier to to be able to manage others. But it does start with how you manage yourself. Thank you.
Now we have the student with some question. 快点，这个今天叫你们准备了，这个是一个很好的，都是这样的一个地方。那每个组没有提问题，我们要扣分，我们都要扣。有回答问题的，我们要加分的，本身你要加分。第三组是准备的情况。Hello, teacher.
Hello.
The family welfare system in the United States is very perfect. So, how to establish a complete medical and health service chain for China when it just starts?
I'm sorry, I wasn't able to understand.
Okay. How to establish a complete medical and health service chain for China?
I'm sorry, can you type that? I still, there's an echo in the sound. And I'm sorry, I'm not able to hear very well today. Oh, so yes, that's a very good question. So as I read this, how to establish a complete medical and health system chain for China when it just started. You know, the things that any country can do well includes really basic public health, how we take care of the population that we serve. That includes wellness, being sure that people have access to doctors who can provide a general medical assessment each year, a medical checkup, being sure that mothers or women who are pregnant have access to maternity care, being sure that when babies are born, they're born in hospitals, and hospitals that have the type of training and expertise to take care of the type of care that newborn babies need, prenatal care for mothers. There are a lot of things that any country, and I don't know the Chinese health system very well at all, so please forgive me. So I don't know your system, but what I do know for any country is our first obligation is to protect our citizens. And that includes wellness, how we keep our population healthy. That includes being sure that people are vaccinated for certain conditions so that we don't spread disease, and so that we avoid getting sick whenever there's a lot of disease going around, such as the flu or such as COVID. Other things that we can do outside of the hospital includes promoting healthy living and healthy lifestyles. What type of food and what type of nutritious food is available in our community. Fruits and vegetables. Again, the time that I've been to China, I've seen a lot of fruits and vegetables available. So that's certainly good. That's certainly important. But being sure people have access to fruits and vegetables. Healthy living is and wellness, being sure that people walk, being sure that people avoid. Look, the American version of food is, I'll be the first to admit, is not always healthy. We embrace fast food at times because it is fast, and we seem to be in a hurry at times to do nothing. But and sometimes it is tasty. Just understand, in many cases, a lot of American fast food is not nutritious. It may be tasty, but there's not a lot of nutrition there. And I don't eat at McDonald's, but if someone ate at McDonald's one time a week, that's okay, but you can't eat there every day. So all of these things come together to make a healthy population. The food that we eat, the food that we have access to, the water that we drink, being sure the water that we drink is clean and free of impurities, the air that we breathe. What are things that we can do to be sure that we here in America have had multiple times that we've had water pollution and air pollution that's caused a lot of chronic problems. Now, we've made some deliberate steps through the years to clean that up, and we're better than we were, but that's essential for a healthy living. And then, if our focus is on the wellness model, the holistic model of taking care of the entire patient before they're sick, it costs less to do that, to keep people healthy. Once people are sick, you do need that type of system because, something is going to happen. What type of care do you have for traumatic injuries? If you're in a vehicle crash or you're in a scooter accident, what type of medical care do you have for that? It is important to be sure that you build that and support that well. But the first start in all of this is a public health approach. And that is protecting the community and serving the community and doing the things we can to promote healthy living in the community. I know that was a long answer but that was a very good question.
Thank you, teacher.
Thank you.
From the lecture, you tell some story for us. Your family have lived in Jordan for 200 years old, and you tell some healthy development, like streetcar in New Orleans. You tell us some maybe that expenditure is different French corner and the University of New Orleans. So thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you very much. Okay.
Okay. We will over the class. See you next day. See you next week.
Yes, I will see you next week.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye bye, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Bye bye.